We've got the courage. We've got the heart. We've got the brain. Here we are, we the people. Now we need to activate that again, and I guarantee you we're going to find our way back.
Hey, everybody, this is Marianne Williamson, and welcome to today's podcast and our conversations about things that matter. Today's conversation matters a lot because it has to do with the water that we drink, the water that we bathe in, the water that we and our children swim in. Obviously, we want to care about the oceans. We want to care about all the waters of the world. But this has to do with a very specific water crisis here in the United States today. I know if you're old enough, you probably saw the movie Erin Brockovich. That came out 20 years ago now. If you have not seen the movie, I suggest that you run and see it. It was a great film directed by Steven Donziger, and Julia Roberts won a very well-deserved Oscar for Best Actress that year, playing a very real character, a character that you are going to meet shortly, named Erin Brockovich. And the story of what happened in Hinckley, California, when in 1996, PG&E had to pay $333 million, the largest settlement ever, to over 600 plaintiffs who had been poisoned by chromium-6 in their water. Now, we all saw that movie, yay, Erin Brockovich. We all love the stories of the heroes that stand up to the big corporate polluters, the big corporate forces that make it difficult, that make people sick, that hurt people in their workplace or whatever. But I think that there's also an awakening to the fact that this is not just about a single case here or a single case there. This is about the corruption of our entire system, our entire governmental system, our entire political system, and our entire society, whereby the short-term profits of huge multinational corporate entities are often, in fact, more often than not, placed before the safety and the health and the well-being of our people. Now, on the topic of water specifically, good news and bad news. Erin Brockovich has a new book out. That's good. Superman's not coming. Our national water crisis and what we, the people, can do about it. Here's the story. It's not like, oh, this is great, what happened in Hinckley, and they got the PG&E to pay. And then you like to think, oh, so now all these companies have learned that they better not act like this anymore. Not. What Erin Brockovich says in this book that's quite disconcerting is that the problem has only grown exponentially over the last 20 years. As a matter of fact, a lot of the, even when settlements are charged, you could, on another topic, you could see this about Purdue, the Purdue family, the Slacker family, Purdue Pharma, big pharmaceutical company. So the fact that we've had over 400,000 opioid drug overdoses that could be traced to predatory behavior on the part of big pharmaceutical company executives. Well, we see these big multi-billion-dollar settlements, but we have come to realize that what you and I see as gargantuan amounts of money is sometimes to some of these people and to some of these corporate forces just kind of like, lunch money. It's not enough to really make a difference. It's just the cost of doing business. And we're living at a time where there's what's called agency capture, whereas in this last administration, there were people put in the head of these agencies who actually represented the very corporate forces that the agency was set up to protect us from when they were seeking to overreach for financial gain. Hopefully some of that will be changing in a very fundamental way soon. But one of the things Erin Brockovich makes clear is that this is not simple. This is complicated, and none of it's going to fundamentally change until you and I do. It's not going to fundamentally change until there's a rebirth of citizenship. There's not going to be a new birth of freedom in the United States if there's not a new birth of citizenship among all of us. So much of what has happened has been because we took our eye off the ball. The very title of Erin's book, Superman's Not Coming, means there's nobody out there that's going to save us from this. It's going to be a mass movement that saves us from this. And that's what Erin Brockovich is trying to establish with this book. We need a mass movement. She likens it to what has happened with Me Too. I think one of the things you'll hear me say to her in our interview is that people have had an awakening about pesticides over the last few years. We've had an awakening about the entire issue of corporate interests, just peripheralizing the interests of the people of the United States and the people of the world in too many cases. But one of the things that this book is about is this awakening happening as we speak, that, oh my God, we're in trouble when it comes to our water. We have more than 85,000 chemicals on the market in the United States today, and we've only studied about 200 of them, or 1%, for safety. The Federal Water Pollution Control Act was established in 1948. It was rewritten in 1972. But listen to this. Between 2004 and 2009, the Clean Water Act was violated more than 500,000 times. Most of the big polluters evaded any kind of punishment. In February 2017, President Trump signed an executive order instructing the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers to review and rewrite Clean Water Rule and reassess whether the rule is consistent with promoting economic growth and minimizing regulations. They talk all the time about, those forces about getting rid of job-killing regulations. First of all, these are job-creating regulations because you have to hire people to make sure that the regulations are aligned with. But even more than that, this idea that it's, so you say, okay, it's the job killing regulations. So what? We're supposed to have child killing lack of regulations? Because that's what we're talking about here. When you're talking about certain kinds of chemicals that are in our water. And that's why, if you haven't seen Erin Brockovich, make sure that you do. 2016 report by the Environmental Working Group found that about 2/3 of the U.S. population, 218 million people, are drinking water contaminated with potentially unsafe levels of that same chemical that was found in the water at Hinkley. This is a great paragraph that I want you to hear from Superman's Not Coming. I think this is really kind of mind-blowing. Imagine if the nightly news reported that we had a bioterrorism threat that could affect millions of Americans. It would be mayhem. People would be in a panic, running for cover, and demanding that our elected officials help protect us all. Yet there is a threat affecting millions of Americans drinking contaminated water in this country, and it is business as usual. Water pollution is one of the greatest risks to human health, and few of us realize the intensifying burdens on our country's water resources until these problems show up on our door. She says that she thinks our society has been lulled to sleep. That's the position of Erin Brockovich, and I think that we would all agree. We just sort of have been trained to believe certain things were being handled. I think other generations knew that they weren't. Other generations knew that they had to fight for unions. They knew that they had to fight for child labor laws. They knew they had to fight for women's suffrage. We have lost in our time some of the rambunctiousness that is necessary, is a core principle of U.S. citizenship in a democracy. We have a government now that is a system of legalized bribery. The corporate money so floods the system. The only antidote to that is an awakened citizenry. And before we bring on Erin, I also want to point out something else in the book that I think is important. And that's that the United States spends more than any other country on its military, and the U.S. Department of Defense is one of the worst polluters in the world. Its footprint is bigger than any corporation, with toxins spreading across 40 million acres of U.S. soil. And many of our military bases are Superfund sites. Well, the bigger issue, of course, is getting the money out of politics, because that's the cancer underlying all these other cancers. But in the meantime, until we can do that, we need to make sure that on every issue possible, we make the difference. When it comes to water, this is where Erin Brockovich comes in. I saw the movie, loved the movie. We like I said, we all love the movies about the hero that stands up and makes the difference. It's not going to be enough if one environmental hero stands up, or one criminal justice hero stands up, or one person who's showing up for children stands up, soloists will not get the job done. We need now a choir. We need an uplift and an uprising in the consciousness of citizenship in order to turn this thing around. And that's what I really like about Erin Brockovich, because she talks about that. She's not someone who's saying, oh, it's all about me. She's saying it's all about us. I always say we all need to find our inner Erin Brockovich. And she talks a lot about how women, particularly, that when she goes into these communities or she's contacted by people in these communities, hey, something's wrong with my water, my children have chronic nosebleeds, I have a certain kind of cancer, my neighbor has the same kind of cancer, we think it's something in our water smells funny, our water looks funny, our water tastes funny, and we know that this is happening all over this country now. We know this. I certainly talked about it on my campaign. The issue now is something that I think Erin I love that she points this out, how often it is women, how often, particularly it's mothers, that contact her because this mama bear thing that happens. You don't have to be a mother for this to happen. You just, it's something that happens when you get to the point where the life of children and generations after you begins to seem as important to you as does your own. And yet, what Erin and I talk about in this conversation is, what is it that keeps too many women silent? At a certain point, the era of data collection is over. It's not about getting more information. It's about owning the information you already have, owning it emotionally and psychologically, so you're willing to stand up and say something. And often we don't say something because we're embarrassed that somebody's going to make fun of us, somebody's going to smear us, somebody's going to not approve of us, somebody's going to lie about us, somebody's going to attack us. And they might. Although I think for those of us who are women living in the United States or any other advanced democracy, we want to remember that, they're going to throw tomatoes or they're going to lie about us. But that's nothing compared to what women activists are having to take in other countries, such as Saudi Arabia right now, where there's a woman, Luhain, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Please look it up. The woman who was protesting in support of women being able to drive in Saudi Arabia has now been sentenced to over 5 years in a Saudi Arabian prison. Hopefully, with our new president, hopefully with our new Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken will bring moral authority back to American foreign policy, and the United States will not be silent in the face of such egregious human rights transgression as is now being perpetrated by countries like Saudi Arabia. But we'll see. And in the meantime, every time that an American woman is thinking whether or not to speak up about something that needs to be faced, that needs to be named, and that needs to be changed, perhaps we should think of all the women around the world who can't speak up. Or if they do speak up, do so at the risk of severe punishment, and do it not just for yourself, not just for your own children, not just for your own country, but for those women as well. And so here it is. Here's my conversation with the inimitable Erin Brockovich about her book, Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis and What We, the People, Can Do About It. Specifically, what are the places inside ourselves that we need to address in order to be the racehorses? I feel like we're all racehorses, and there's this gate in front of us, and we know we're racehorses, and we want to get out there, and we want to do it, and we want to make a difference, but we feel so often like that door, the gate is locked. Let's unlock each other's gates, as it were. And hang around until after my conversation with her so that you can hear the Q&A section. Somebody wrote me a letter that I think is pretty interesting, and I think you will too. Okay, here she is, the amazing Erin Brockovich. Erin Brockovich, thank you so much for being here. I'm your biggest fan, if that's possible.
Hey, listen, I am your biggest fan. I am delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's a real honor to hear you say that. Of course, I saw the movie 20 years ago, Erin Brockovich. We all knew the story. We all knew that PG&E gave the biggest settlement, $333 million. But when I read your book, what I came to realize, and actually it was not the first time, I had seen other things as well that made me realize that the problem is far from over. In fact, what you have to say is that the problem is much, much worse. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. On our environmental front, especially the water issue is way deeper and much worse than people would imagine. It's hard to talk about it because it's overwhelming and it's daunting. And oh gosh, don't we live in a world that's full of bad news? And I always tell people that, water's never a soundbite, it's always a story. So it's difficult when you're doing interviews to really get out there what's happening. And so, again, why I would enjoy so much being here today is to be able to have a conversation about water. But the short response to your question is yes, it's worse than people would imagine.
In 2016, a report from the Environmental Working Group found that about 2/3 of the American population, which is 218 million people, are drinking water contaminated with potentially unsafe levels of that same chemical, chromium-6, which is what you talked about and what you were fighting against in the case with PG&E in 1996. Okay, so what makes you is not only that you're willing to stand up the way you do when there's a problem, but also that you are an optimistic person and you say, we can handle this. But you also say in your book that it can't be just because Erin Brockovich stands up. At this point, we need a whole army of Erin Brockoviches. We need a citizen movement. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I think we're in that moment, and I'm sure we'll kind of weave in and out of numerous, topics or points throughout our talk today. But I am somewhat, even though it's so tumultuous out here right now for all of us, a little more hopeful about a people's movement than I have been in a really long time. I think we're in an era coming where we'll see citizen science. We will see moms on the rise. We will see people and a movement around the environment and our water. And what you'll learn is what I've learned. And I think we're now seeing that, we are the environment. When the environment's in peril, so are we. And that the environment is a great journey into your own self-discovery. And that's exactly what happens. And I see it happening in communities everywhere when we get involved. When they get back involved with the water and the environment, they find themselves, they find their voice, and they begin to rise.
Well, one of the things that you've talked about in quite a few places is the fact that often it begins with a mother. And it began for you as a mother when you first, and there's that scene in Erin Brockovich when you, to talk about you, you're a verb, you're the name of a movie. That must be so weird for you.
I'm always like the third person in a room. I'm like, hello, I'm here.
I know. So you as a mother saw these horrifying statistics about other women's children who were being poisoned. You as a mother felt, whoa, this is wrong. But there was something in you specifically that made you unwilling to shut up. And that's what I want to talk to you about. You talk in your book about giving ourselves permission. Mm-hmm. I have seen so much. We've all seen so much. If you look at the numbers of American women, if you look at our financial power, if you look at our political power, if you look at our numbers, it is actually ridiculous how many problems still exist for no other reason than that we have not stood up and said en masse, this needs to stop right now. Because right. We have the power. And so I want to talk about what psychologically and emotionally keeps too many women from standing up. Now, you talk about it as stick-to-itiveness. You say that your mother told you that you have stick-to-itiveness, and your mother pointed to the dictionary and said there's actually word stick-to-itiveness. Where I come from, it's called chutzpah. Yeah. And you are simply unwilling, and you don't care if somebody claims to be an expert or they claim to be a scientist or they claim to be a lawyer. You know bullshit when you see it.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people know bullshit when they see it, but they're unwilling to own what they know. It's not like we need more data now. We need to own what we know. Right. What do you see? One of the things you talk about, if even one woman starts, and another woman will support her. What is the psychological and emotional permission we need to give more women in this country so that we will start the movement that needs to be started to make sure that the ungodly and unhealthy and toxic chemicals are removed from our water and stop poisoning our children?
Boy, let me think about where I would begin. So, the book, Superman's Not Coming, Our National Water Crisis and What We the People Can Do About It, there's a deeper meaning in it, and it doesn't have to be about water. It could be about anything in our life. Really, Superman's not coming. And to answer your question, why I think we've done it is a psychological, take a look at that, emotional, take a look at that situation where oftentimes women in particular, we're suppressed back on that. You're overreacting. You're being a hysterical mom. And many times when that happens, when we're pushed on, oh, you're being ridiculous. You don't have the proof. You don't have the information. You didn't graduate from college. You're not the doctor. You're not the lawyer. You're not the scientist, which is exactly what happened to me in Hinckley. That drove me insane. I'm like, well, I don't have to be any of that to be a human and to tell you that what I see out here is wrong. The two-headed frogs are weird. The green water's not normal, and people are sick. So oftentimes, 99% of the time when I get involved, it's always a mom. She does know what's going on. She wants to own it, but as soon as she says something, here comes that pushback for a lot of reasons, and you're being hysterical, and you're going to damage property values, and people could lose their job, and you don't know what you're talking about, and they back away. It's like, you remember in school, you never wanted to be the first person with your hand up in class, because what if you were wrong? Everybody makes fun of you. I, in a way, was unbeknownst to me being prepared for where my life was going back as a kid because I'm a dyslexic. And oftentimes I was teased and bullied, and I put my hand up and the answer was wrong and everybody would laugh at me. But I knew inside I knew, but I wasn't necessarily saying it right. So a teacher would go, "You're correct, Erin." And I felt a box, and I've never liked to be boxed in. And by the way, none of us really do. I didn't like to be labeled or judged. So early on, I had a good sense of who I was and learning how to get out of that box and to be seen and heard. So you mentioned stick-to-itiveness, and a lot of who I am is really from my mom and my dad having a disability, which I thought throughout my life would damage me, and being able to look back and now know that it was my gift. We're taught vulnerability is weakness, right? Kindness is weakness. And we don't embrace our vulnerabilities because they're hidden gems and can be your greatest strength. So there is one of my favorite books is Emotional Intelligence, and it's a real thing. And women have incredible instincts, but we don't want to see them as a real thing. And I go crazy when people who are on the ground living in these communities day in and day out, we even question them as to what they're experiencing. They hold all the answers, yet we won't ask. We won't look to them. We won't believe what they're experiencing. And so early on, my mom taught me that I had to have stick-to-itiveness. I would always come home feeling teased and dejected and mortified in many situations. And she'd say, "You know what, Erin, when the going gets tough, the tough get going." We've all heard that before. And she said, "You've got to have that stick-to-itiveness," which I actually thought was a made-up word. So I questioned her. And my mom was a journalist and a sociology major. Very interesting combination. School teacher, great command of the English language. Got the Webster's Dictionary out and read me the definition. Propensity to follow through in a determined manner. Dogged persistence born of obligation and stubbornness. I'm like, oh, yeah, see, that's all you needed to say. Stubborn is my middle name. I'm dogged. I'm determined. And she'd say, life is going to require you have stick-to-itiveness. And we're not just necessarily born with it. You have to develop the habit of persevering even when you don't want to. And it would be easier to give up. And that word just exists in my cells. And when I began my work in Hinckley, Roberta Walker was the first mother out there. She knew it was in her. She knew what she saw. She knew what she was experiencing. She was getting the same pushback. So it became a perfect storm was brewing, if you will. And you talk about permission. What we're really looking for is support. And I came on the scene and supported. I believed her. Why would I not? I didn't live in Hinckley every single day. She did. And that support went a huge way. And then she and I became two. We got the support of other mothers, and it became 5 and 10 and 50 and 100 and 200. And, numbers is a big deal. When you have the numbers, and now it's a situation where they're like, wait a minute, it's not one saying this or two, it's hundreds. So the collective is unbelievably powerful. And I talk about that in my book, and we weave you through communities. I began my work when I was 30. I'm 60 now, a grandmother of 4. I've got a lot more wisdom, that's for certain. But I will guarantee you, through these decades, every single time when a woman owns, and it's usually moms, you know why? Because they're sick and tired of being lied to. They know their kid is sick. They're not getting answers. They usually have that stick-to-itiveness, and they're going to get in the game, and they're going to stay in it until they find out what's happening. Across America, this exists, but it has yet to be that huge movement.
Right.
And as I said earlier, we're in this window where that movement, because I think we're seeing so much now that we haven't seen before. COVID really knocked us down. And here we are at home. We stopped spinning. And when you do, you can stop and go, wait a minute, what's happening
Right.
now? And so
Right.
I think that there's a large wake-up moment happening. And I've seen that it exists, and it has out there for a very long time. But whoever they are doesn't listen or want to believe or wants to question you that what you're experiencing isn't real. And that's the first hit you take, where you begin to question yourself and you back away.
Well, first of all, I want to ask you a question. Did your mother live to see you become you? Did she live to see the movie? Did she live to see it all happen?
She did.
Wow.
She,
She
no,
must have been the proudest mother in the world. Excellent. Okay, so I want to talk about, that's
She did.
really, really beautiful. But your father did not, is that correct?
My father did. Oh, absolutely. And my father was a huge influence in my life as well. He was all about the stick-to-itiveness. He was also a man of honor. Lies was the issue for my dad. And the lessons I learned from him, when I made my movement out in Hinckley, I could feel, what did my dad say? Lies. There's a lie circulating around here. And my dad is the one that really got into my soul about water. And he was a mechanical engineer. He actually ran the pipelines for Citigroup. And I think he saw things happening and things happening to the water. But as a child, he got into my mind by singing me songs. And we would be playing down in the creek, and he would sing, "Isn't the water beautiful, trickling down the stream? Enjoy it today, Erin. For someday, it might not be seen." And I never forgot that.
And it certainly stayed within you and helped turn you into who you are. Let's talk about, I want to stay with this issue of what silences a woman. Misogyny is a word for a reason. And some people feel we have even a cellular memory of a time when women who spoke their truth, particularly their intuitive knowing, their own experiential knowing that was not granted them by a patriarchal culture, were literally burned at the stake. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a way in which we have not routed out of our consciousness the projection onto a woman who speaks her mind that, oh, no, girl, don't you do that. And there are various ways to burn a woman at the stake. I always say we've changed the continent from W to B. We don't call her a witch anymore necessarily, but we'll call her a bitch, or
Yep.
we'll call her crazy. It's still the
Yep.
same. Well, she's a crazy. She's a hysterical mom.
Oh, yeah.
She's a hysterical mom is just another form of she's a witch. She's a witch. She's a witch. And it's all part of the nullification of a woman's voice. And I also see, even with women who have stronger careers and they already have a place in the society where theoretically they can speak their voice, they do have a platform. Sometimes I feel like they're so into brand protection, they don't want to upset anybody. It's a culture of people pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just said that I think is so interesting, it's not just that a woman needs permission. She needs to give herself permission. First of all, we need to give ourselves permission. We need to say, all right, what are they going to do to me? And I think this is really important, Erin, for American women. They might throw tomatoes at me. They might lie about me. But look at that compared to when you look at what other women, or the woman from Hong Kong who the Chinese are now torturing because she sent dispatches from about Wuhan. So I think, first of all, we have to have bravery now. We have to have courage. But what you just said about support, because I read a study once that said that if a woman speaks up and somebody rolls their eyes about her, and there's this awkward silence in the room, meant to silence her, of course, that even one other person saying, well, actually, I agree with her, will make all the difference in the system. And that's what happened between you and Roberta, right?
Absolutely. And I've seen it happen everywhere. And it's very key. Support of her family, support of a neighbor, support of a girlfriend. And once that support system gets engaged, it's amazing what happens. They become very empowered, and it's contagious, if you will. And then they learn more, and then they're asking more, and they're passionate more, and they find out more, because what they learn is every woman in the group already has a sick child, but they don't want to talk about it because it's going to upset the school or the family, or somebody could lose their job. The strength that they find in that support is immense.
Well, you were talking about your mother being a sociologist. A common characteristic within every advanced mammalian species that survives and thrives is the fierce behavior of the adult female of that species until when there's a threat to her cubs. Among the hyenas, the adult female hyenas will encircle the cubs while they're feeding, and they will not let the adult males get anywhere near. So I think that it is inbred in all of us that we do want to take a stand. And of course, we've all been mentally trained to think somebody's handling it. Surely there's someone at the EPA who handles all this. Surely. So as you say in your book, this is not just something that happened in Hinckley. This is not just something that happened in Flint. This is not just something, as I learned on my presidential campaign, PFAS in New Hampshire, Denmark, South Carolina. We've all heard about Newark. You're saying it's ubiquitous. You're saying it's all over the place. And there's a confluence now between that understanding brought to us by someone like yourself, plus the larger picture that this is how corporate America too often operates, where the money to be made, and particularly given how much of that money can then influence our politicians and corrupt our agencies, becoming agency capture, now overrides the safety and well-being of the American people. Once we get that, we're disillusioned, but disillusion just means you're no longer under an illusion. So you're saying this is a moment of awakening. I'm reminded of the Dalai Lama, even though I don't think we need a man's verification, saying that if the Western world is to be saved, it will be because of the Western woman. So now we need this army of Erin Brockoviches, that every woman, we talk a lot about our inner child. Each of us has an inner Erin Brockovich, right?
I always like to say, I'm going to break out into a Beatles song. I am you, you are me, we are all together. And every mother, and it is, it's generally women here on the front line of these environmental issues that are going with that instinct. And, instinct is oftentimes, poo-pooed. Oh, that just can't be real. But energy and intelligence can live deep in your gut. And not only does support help, but you've got to realize you've got to support and stand with and stand beside yourself. And that's the one person we often question. And it's a hard place to get to. And generally when they get there, they're so fed up that now it's like, I don't care what you think of me. This is,
I know once you get there, I know it takes you so long to get to the point where you'll open your mouth, and once you open, it's like, oh, and I'm not shutting them now.
I'm not
And
done.
that, of course, is, I know I've been there, I am there, and I love the scenes. The scenes in Erin Brockovich in the movie that were so powerful is she simply wouldn't. I'm talking about you, would simply not be shut up. You would just throw it right back. So you have 9 steps in your book.
Yes,
For the formation of this movement. Can we go through the 9 steps?
absolutely.
Okay, you say number 1,
I have
consider
my
this your
book right over here,
invitation.
but I got it.
Great. Okay, I'm going to read them to you, and then you tell me what they mean.
Okay.
Number 1, none of us need a PhD or a science degree to be aware and to protect our right to clean water. And you say, consider this your invitation. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that sets us back. We've been groomed in many ways that you need to have a degree in science or mathematics or be a politician to possibly get involved in a situation that could be accusing a corporation or challenging local leadership or health departments or anything else. And when I listen, I grew up thinking I'd be the least likely to succeed. But what I stayed with in something, I'm very visual. I know what I saw. I know what I see. Don't tell me what I see isn't there or that I'm crazy. And I don't need a PhD. I was told that all the time. You don't have to be that to be a human, to be a mom, and to see what's wrong. Stay with that and give yourself that permission. You know what you see. You know what you believe. You know what you feel. Own that and stay with it. That's one of the first steps that you can take. And I promise you, and you know this, there's many women out there doing that. So in this podcast, if you know that person that's right on the cusp, give them that encouragement and support and don't question what they're experiencing. So you don't need to be any of that to be a human, to know what you see, to get behind yourself. That's the first step.
And you see it everywhere. You know, it's not just about women, and it's not just about water, and it's not just about particular corporations with water. It's about how the whole system operates. I know when I ran for president, how many people were saying that I had no right to be there. So the idea was that only people whose careers had been ensconced for years in the mindset that led us into this terrible ditch that we're all in should be considered qualified to lead us out of the ditch. And I would look at the Constitution of the United States. It says anybody's qualified who's over, who's lived here for 14 years and over 35, et cetera. There is this idea, who are you to have an opinion? You should shut up now. You have no right to an opinion. And that's a killer. That's how we nullify people's voices. And it's also the greatness of a free society that anybody can have an opinion and anybody has a right to be in that marketplace of ideas. So I think that who are you to say anything is the enemy right there. That's the sort of demonic thought. Who are you?
Right.
Who are you? And you said, I'm Erin Brockovich. And I think that's how we all have to be. Okay. Step number 2, know your power. We, the people, I love how you use that phrase because I'm with you on that, must take these steps to make a difference that can and will and must change the world. What's this know your power to you? What does that mean to you?
Well, so I have a program that I call RAM, Be a Ram. I love Rams, their confidence up on those rocks. But see, they know themselves. They know what they can do. You've got to know who you are. And that step is to just realize who you are. And I think where we stop in this moment is one of the first things that we'll realize about ourselves is we'll go negative because we've already been told you're not this, you're not that. But I encourage you to realize a strength that you do have. Find it. And if there's something you don't like, this is the beauty of us as people, as a species, as a human race. You can choose to change something. You can choose to see how you perceive yourself. So reassess what it is you might not like about you and change that. I think of it like real estate. So you list your house, the appraisal comes in low. What do? You maybe remodel the bathroom, put in a new floor, appraisal goes up. You can do that for yourself. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid to look at yourself and step back because you think you're imperfect. Oh my gosh, if you only knew how flawed I was, none of us are perfect. And you know what? Sometimes we are our own worst enemy and we are too hard on ourselves. So realize who you are, embrace yourself, strengths and flaws. If you don't like something, change it. And I want you to get in that game.
Well, I also think we're addicted to being liked, and we're addicted to applause, and we're addicted to people's approval. I mean, sometimes when people don't like what you said or what you did, it's not that there was something wrong with you; it's that you were fine. It triggered them. That might not have anything to do with you. So I think I certainly agree with you. We have to recognize where we're flawed and change it, but we also have to recognize where we're strong. And if other people don't like it,
Right.
that has more to do with them than it has to do with us, which once again, in the movie, that is made very clear about your personality.
Yeah,
Now,
and
a lot of,
sometimes we'll take something personal that isn't meant to be. But generally, when I get that pushback, now see, I'm looking at you. What is it you
uh-huh,
don't want me to know? What is it you're doing that makes you want to shut
right.
me up? And then I'll get a
That's
little
exactly
more
right.
combative at that point.
That's exactly right. And also, I know this is a generalization, but it seems to me to be a difference between women and men to some extent. I don't know men who have said, "Oh, this is so embarrassing, I can't continue." But I know women, and I know because I am one, who will feel this is so embarrassing, this is so humiliating. These things they're saying, I'm so humiliated that they would say this about me. The public shaming. I don't think men are as easily stopped. And I think it is that old misogynistic
Mhm.
cellular memory of the terrible punishment that women have gotten throughout history when they stand up to a patriarchal order. The next thing you talk about, Erin, is getting curious. I think a lot of people, you said there's an awakening. I think that a lot of people, not just on the issue of water, but certainly what we're talking about here today is water. So mothers, fathers, whatever sex, they go, what's going on here? You mean our water is that toxic? You mean that wasn't just handled with her PG&E case? You mean we all have toxic water? You mean that might have something to do with cancers among us? That might have something to do with my child's chronic nosebleeds? That might have to do with a higher rate of chronic disease in our children? So what you say is request a copy of your water quality report and identify any contaminants that exceed legal limits. Tell people how to do that. How does let's say somebody's listening to you right now and they say, I don't know how to get a copy of my water quality report. And we all know the scene in the movie where you went, but most people, they don't know where to go. Tell us what
Right.
people are supposed to do.
Well, get curious is a great place. Curiosity is awesome, and it can help push you along to asking those questions. I share a big collage in my book of all the dirt. Welcome to America. Those dirty water photos. It's purple, it's green, it's yellow. It's mothers sending these pictures in. They know this isn't right, so don't assume that it's okay. Get curious, ask questions. You can get online and just Google, how to find my water report and put in your zip code and it will come up. You could go to the Environmental Working Group site. Yep, I see your hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I want to slow down right there. What does a woman do at that point? You just said, or a man, anybody. Okay. So what you just said, somebody can Google it. Somebody can get online. They can get their water quality report. So let's say somebody does that right now. Then what do? Do they just put it on their Facebook page? Do they put it on Twitter? Do they call their friends? Do they call their city council? What does somebody do next?
Well, this is where it can get complicated and not in a bad way, but they'll get the water quality report and you're supposed to be getting one every quarter. Now, they're delayed by a quarter, so oftentimes you may be getting a report and the contamination's already gone through and now they're not going to report it. But they'll get the report, and if they don't understand something, oftentimes they will email it to me or contact me, and I will tell them, this is what's going on. I would go on this track. I would go down to the municipality, and they will. Or they fascinate me every time because they'll get a water quality report. They may contact me, but they'll start talking to their neighbors, and they'll know that there's a chemical in it. They'll Google it. Google can provide a lot of data for you at home just to have
Uh-huh.
in your hand to get you on that track. And then they immediately start putting together patterns. So they'll get a water quality report, they'll question it, and you're right to question it. And here's the thing that's so overwhelming. There's a plethora of chemicals that can be in there that are a huge problem. So what I did in the beginning in these water quality reports, they will come out almost in a bar graph, and they'll tell you what levels they should be. They'll tell you what levels they're at. Some water quality reports will tell you a little bit about the chemical. They'll start figuring it out from there, and they won't even hone down to all the necessary data. They'll just go, uh-oh, okay, so this is a bad chemical. It is in our water. I didn't know that. I'm going to start talking to my neighbors. They do, then they recognize those patterns, and I'm telling you at that point, they're off and running.
Okay, now somebody's off and running. Now on step 4, where you say attend meetings with your public officials to voice your concerns. What is that? Your city council meeting? What does somebody do? And how do they get on the, how does somebody get on the agenda at the city council meeting? How does that work?
Sometimes you can just show up, and that's what I encourage people. If you've ever not been to a city council meeting, you should go, because city council
should be the new hot Thursday night day. Yeah,
absolutely, because they're usually just talking to themselves. And we have to show up. We can't assume that city council can read our minds, right, and know what's going on until we show up. We had a case against Shell Oil down in Carson, California. And so to answer your question, we got on the agenda to talk about this contamination in Carousel. It was called the Carousel Track. And literally crude was bubbling up in people's backyard. And people had diseases, cancer, massive levels of benzene. But we got on the agenda because there wasn't a cleanup order coming yet out of the city council. So we were in there, but what we did was we bussed in 4,000 residents. City council didn't know that. So when they were ready to finish, they said, is there anyone else here? And we said, there are a few from the Carousel Track. And they said, well, they can come in and speak now. They waited till all of them got in there. But what they did was they brought a guinea pig, a stuffed guinea pig, and children and elderly and mom and dads pinned notes to those stuffed guinea pigs, the little toy ones, about what they were experiencing. We were in chambers till 2, 3 in the morning. The looks on their face, they had no idea. This is what I want us to learn. We have been missing. We, the people, need to show up. And when they did, I'll tell you, by 8 a.m. the next day, there were orders from that city council to Shell Oil to begin cleanup immediately. That's what happens when we show up.
You're such a woman of my heart. A lot of what has happened with the last 4 years, et cetera, I think has awakened all of us to our need for a new dimension of citizenship. Too many just assumed they were handling it, whoever they were. And now we can't go back to the level of sort of sleep that we were in before all these things became so obvious. We all have to do things like, and I've been saying for a long time, women, you should say to your guy or to your woman, hey, I'm going to a city council meeting on Wednesday. Want to go with me? It's the new hot date. And what you're saying, just showing up. And one of the things I've heard you talk about and read is where you said a lot of times at these city council meetings, you find that the city council members didn't know.
They don't.
I mean, I've seen that in lobbying. Yeah, I've seen this in lobbying Congress people, where it wasn't just about asking the Congress people to do something. It was also about informing the Congress people about certain things were happening that they didn't even know.
Correct. And they don't.
And if you feel that,
put them down, but we can't assume anything if we're not going to show up and bother to find out.
And also to take that leadership position. I mean, you might feel like, well, somebody needs to get a lot of people, like you might be in, let's say, Venice Beach. I'm thinking of a friend of mine who's running for something in Venice. You might be on the beach in Venice. I love one of those scenes in the movie where you're at a festival or group picnic or something
Yep.
like that, and you're going around talking to people. Think of all the things we do socially that you could be passing out. You could be passing out a leaflet. Obviously, this is once
Mhm.
COVID is over. You could be passing out a leaflet, and you can do the equivalent online saying, are you concerned about the water quality in our community? Meet here. Or are you concerned about the water quality in our community? Get on this Zoom call. 8 o'clock, we're going to have someone that Erin Brockovich had said would talk to us, or we're going to investigate ourselves. I think we just need one person, and I hope that one person is listening right now. Check out what the water quality is in your community. Don't think that the answer is just to buy bottled water. Not everybody can afford to do that. Plus, we
Right.
don't know what's even in all the bottled water.
Right.
And just start somewhere. So then you're saying in step 6, start a petition, engage your local media, make signs, keep garnering support for the cause. And what you were saying, Erin, when you were talking about 4,000 people, how could the media not want to cover that, right?
Well, media can be a great tool, by the way. And and we do share all these stories in the book because I remember when the film came out, I went to the movie theater by myself and sat in a back corner. Nobody knew who I was. And the place was packed. And I was amazed with their reaction, but I was listening. And I would hear a man here or there say it, but it was mostly women. They're like, oh my gosh, that happened there. I wonder if it could happen here. Oh my gosh, wow, a corporation could poison them. Wow, I didn't know that. You know what? I think I could do this. I know I can do this. And I was like going, yes, because I think watching that gave them that, wait a minute, is this going on? I could do that. Wait a minute, that bothers me. Or they've already known something and they started to put it together. But the media can be so helpful. And as I said, we share these stories in the book, and so many come to mind. But one of them just recently, because you mentioned the PFOA, the PFAS, which is the largest emerging contaminant in the history of this country. Up in Minnesota, a community got involved. They've taken every step that you and I just went over. And here comes the media. The media stayed with them, and because it created a platform that more knew and more knew, to make a long story short, this got to the governor. And I am happy to report that the state of Minnesota has now banned the use of this chemical in their state. So collective, the community, and then the media, they can play a huge role. And another great platform is also, and I can't tell you how many groups, and it is going to be women that found each other on Facebook, recognized that pattern, came to me and said, we all went to the same high school. And I started doing further research, and lo and behold, they were built on an old Kodak fill landfill with all kinds of chemicals that was a Superfund site. But they got together, and then locally they got the media involved, and then they went from there and started getting some answers to their questions, information that helped them with their health impacts. But the social media and the media itself can be an extremely useful platform and tool to get you even to the larger platform that you need to get to, whether it's banning a chemical. Yes, sometimes it can be a lawsuit, to whether it's just uncovering the truth. We can't defend or protect ourselves if we don't know what's happened. And once they find that out, they are in a better position to protect, nurture, love their health and their family and their community once they know.
Over the last few years, I think there has been an awakening on the subject of pesticides, Dow Chemical, et cetera, and the way the EPA would repeal so much of what Trump did with the Clean Water Act, but with other regulations as well. And of course, they use the term that they want to be pro-business. They don't want to put these burdens of these safety regulations on business because profit maximization for these huge corporate entities should matter more than our children's health. I think the pesticide issue has had a lot of people more aware over the last few years, but I think we're just beginning to get it about water. Like I said, I heard some things when I was on my campaign, and until then, I had not realized it was as bad as it was. Okay, step 7, shield yourself, request or purchase home water filters or bottled water until the problem is resolved.
Correct.
Step 8, continue to press elected officials to be honest and keep the lines of communication open. Why is it this? We have, I've worked so much with men and women over the decades, and one of the topics that we come to understand in relationship is about codependency, and about sometimes, honey, you just gotta understand he's lying to you. He's lying to you. And yet sometimes when it comes to elected officials, we're loath to say, he's lying to you. She's lying to you. Right? PG&E was lying to you. Shell's lying to you. Chevron's lying to you. Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And if you can get to the point where you realize also too about your boyfriend or your wife or whomever, this is another psychological issue, isn't it? To really understand these people lie.
Yeah. And
what do you have to say about that?
It's a blow. So I see how the communities are reacting. It is, especially in Hinckley, because so many of those families, provider was an employee. So they started to think, oh my gosh, why did I not know about this? I poisoned my family. They feel bad, and you're really socking them in the gut. And it's
right.
For those of us outside here watching in and working with them, you got to give them a beat to absorb it. They're reeling in it, and allow them and respect them to absorb it. They might not be as responsive as you hope. They might not take action quick enough. They'll get there. And this is where you support them and stay in touch. And the idea, they'll hit that moment. You bastards, you lied to me and it cost me my child's health. They will respond. I think that's something that happens for so many of us, that we're always questioned, or we're not respected, or we're not allowed that moment to go, what the hell happened here? And we underestimate the people, and we need to stop doing that. But don't underestimate them, but you do need to give them a moment to catch their breath and go, what the hell's just happened here? And because of a lot of emotions come up with that. You are talking about the most important things for all of us. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. It does not. That is our right to clean water and clean land, clean air, and our health and welfare of ourselves, our family, and those that we love. And when you just smacked them with it and taken that away, it's going to be that moment, and we need to allow them that time to adjust. They'll come around. They'll rise up. I promise you they will. But it may take them a second.
Is the scene in the movie true where the man who gave you the key, the smoking gun, was it because he realized he had destroyed, and it was his own cousin who had died?
Yes, and his children were sick. So there was two, and they put him into one. Steven Soderbergh, had a lot of stuff to work with in a 2-hour film. That's hard to do.
Yeah, he did a brilliant job.
But it was Lily Melendez and Chuck Ebersol. Lily died from being poisoned out there, and she was a female working at PG&E. She knew things, and oh my gosh, she was ridiculed and teased and bullied and shut up. But she came to me, and this became a moment where I believed her, and that support system started to work. So she was able to, with some support, get in a little deeper. And Chuck Ebersol, who was there as well, said, you know what? No. We do have those documents. He did know where they were. And he came forward because his his children were impacted. And I was truly at that bar that night when he approached me. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but when he said that, I couldn't believe it. So there was two very key people, Lily Melendez and Chuck Ebersol.
Did she see the vindication before she died?
She did. And man, what a great gal. It breaks my heart. But she did see it. She got some money because, the employees got sued Betts because Betts mislabeled deliberately the big barrels of drums, so you wouldn't know what it was. And she was able to stabilize and help her children and get them in a place where, they had a home and they would get the health care that they needed. So she did. But I'm telling you, man, she was a real go-getter.
Now, Roberta, who is the character in the film who got the $5 million, and then I've heard you talk about her, so apparently she did survive, correct?
She did. And, they have ongoing health issues. And, Roberta and I are very good friends. We still talk, and I keep in touch with so many of these communities. The answer can't be a lawsuit. Money is not going to give you back your health. What they really want is we need to change our policies. We need to reform policies. We need to begin to look at our infrastructures and have a level of transparency so we don't get in this place, period. And that's where she's at. So she continues, her front of justice and within her family. They are well. They still live out in the area, and I talk to her very often. But I'll tell you, again, that strong woman, she knew what she saw. And, just it's that thing that exists deep in your gut that you can't let go. And she never did. So she's doing well. And again, an amazing woman. Erin Brockovich isn't about Erin Brockovich. Erin Brockovich is about all of us, and that every one of us can rise to this situation. And I did not do this alone. Had any one person or event been out of step, I'm not sure how it would have turned out. But it was because of Lily and Chuck and Roberta, myself, the backing of being able to have a law firm that could begin to look further or do the discovery work, that we were able to uncover this truth. But
your partnership with Masri, there's something there very deep and powerful when two people form an agreement. The Course in Miracles says that's the most powerful force in the universe. What I love about step 9, you say celebrate, honor your journey and the courage and effort it takes to speak up and make a difference. And I think one of the things we talked about before, and I've seen this over and over and over, when people become an activist about something, so many times people are avoiding being an activist because they think it's toxic and they think it's painful and they think it will make them angry. But I think a lot of times it's because we're not activists that we're depressed because we're stuffing all this stuff down. It's once you speak your mind, get out there, become active, start lobbying, go to your city council meetings, you realize how exhilarating it is.
Because 100%.
I know people say to me, Marianne, how do I find my voice? I always say, use your voice on behalf of someone other than yourself.
Right.
People say, how do I find my power? Use your power on behalf of something bigger than yourself. And also you meet new people. You meet interesting people who are also on that sort of same track of things.
You do.
And
You're
so we have
100% correct. And we forget to honor that or celebrate that, or I don't know why we won't allow ourselves, that moment to go, yes, I did it. I am so proud of myself. And don't be afraid to do that and really rejoice.
Well, I think though something that is in your story, it's in my story, it's in the stories of many people, has to do with even one person in childhood who made all the difference. I came from a culture. I came from parents who said, speak up. You had your mother, you had the teacher who realized that even though you failed the test, if you were writing it, you took an A+ if it was given to you orally. Mm-hmm. Some people never had that one spark. And that's why I think the movie is important. That's why I think your book is important. And also, I say this a lot, the revolution of this moment, the cultural revolution of this moment, the awakening of this moment is not just about soloists. It's got to be a song. It's got to be each and every one of us is part of this. If you have a Facebook page, you have a platform. If you have a Twitter page, you have a platform. If you have an Instagram page, you have a platform. And I think it's so amazing, Erin, that you were talking now the way, as much as you do, about the psychological and the emotional dimensions of transforming a society. We can't just jump right to the policy positions that have to change. You're speaking to something so important when you speak to the emotional and psychological situations inside ourselves that keep us quiet, And also something that you talk about in the book that is pretty depressing. Just thinking, we get the right director of the EPA isn't going to necessarily fix it. It's more complicated than that. Although I'll take this moment to ask you, do you have an opinion about Michael Regan being appointed the new EPA head?
No, I posted about it. Yes, and I'm forwardly looking optimistically to some good things happening. And you bring up a really good point. The EPA, our systems are broken. And they have been for a really long time. And I've never left my field. I've been out here just doing steadily the work that all finally led to Superman's not coming. But it's been decades and a small erosion. And we talk about this, the emotional and the psychological, very subliminal little movements. And it's not whether it was intentional or not. Over time, we've evolved. This system has been a little more corrupt, or it's been a little more in repair, that we've now found ourselves in this position. It would be a lot to put on any one person running the EPA to just assume they're going to change it. That director will need our help. And what I want to happen within these agencies is, oh my gosh, get out of your tower over there in Washington, D.C. and get on the ground with the people. You will learn a lot about what is happening, and that we work with those agencies. I think would be very important for that new director to extend a hand and be on the ground with these people. I do feel good about the appointment, though, and I made a specific post about that.
You talk in the book.
Job.
I'm sorry.
It'll be a big job.
Well, I hope you'll move to Washington, D.C., so everybody will know that you're looking. Erin, you talk in the book about the history of the Clean Water Act. You talk about the fact that several years ago, there were 18,000 employees of the EPA. That's been whittled down to 14 or 15,000. In the EPA, as in so many agencies, there's been such low morale because people who were there for the right reason were so depressed about the fact that the agency had been captured by the corporate forces that they were there to, whose overreach they were there to guard us against. Hopefully, like you said, we're entering a new phase and things will be different. But in the meantime, the main point that you're making is that nothing that they do in Washington is a substitute for the kind of citizen activism that we will need in order to turn this country around. And then after we create a more sustainable future, maintain it. Correct?
Absolutely. You know, we got to stop waiting for this magical federal oversight
Superman
to trickle down and change our life, because that's not how it's going to change. It's going to start with you and a neighbor at a local council, and boom, work your way up. Listen, I'm seeing this happening. We could talk about Flint. We could talk about Hannibal. We could talk about Hinckley. We could talk about Poughkeepsie, New York. We could talk down in Martin County, Kentucky. We could talk about the women of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and changing this chloramine that we're using in water. They're lighting it up. Think of this. Every community, no matter how small, every city council, if we took that action, every one of us across this nation, light that up, you'd actually be getting something done. And so this is a good place, and I won't go into it in long detail, but I'm just going to really quick hit the Wizard of Oz, because I really feel we're in that.
I was going to ask you to do that. I've heard you do that, Riff, and I want you to do that. And before you do that, I just want to before you do that, I want to point out, along the line of what you just said, the famous line from Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of concerned citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So, okay, over to you, Frank Baum and The Wizard of Oz.
So I love the movie The Wizard of Oz. I was born and raised in Kansas. So, you know, I watched it and I always loved Dorothy. I'm like, I'm going to be Dorothy and go on a journey. But it's the book that fascinated me, L. Frank Baum, and why he wrote the book at the pre-height of the Industrial Revolution, as a way to teach his children the power of individualism and thinking for oneself in a world that would increasingly begin to speak for you. Look at the revolution we went with industry in our history. We've got a new revolution now. It's been happening with social media, and it's pivoted us. But there's a great political allegory to this book that fascinates me, The Wizard of Oz. And so Dorothy is the girl next door. Aren't we all on a journey searching for her life? And as we see that she goes out to find that journey, and she's the twister is coming, and the political allegory has been really well studied, is a representation of disruption in Washington, D.C. So we all know that the House lands on the Munchkins, who are a representation of the citizens of the country, who are frustrated, who are upset. So they tell her to go find the wizard and follow the yellow brick road. The yellow brick road is actually the gold standard, and follow that path of money to the wizard. So we know along the way she meets the Cowardly Lion, who was actually a representation of L. Frank Baum's really good friend, William Bryan's Jennings, always running for president, but never won. He was known for his fiery rhetoric, but had no courage. That makes me look at a lot of our politicians. And I'm like, that's interesting. So now the girl next door, and now we've got this person that is a representation of policies or politicians. They meet the scarecrow. And the scarecrow was a representation of the American farmer, who everyone at that time thought had no brain because the banks were buying up all the land. And then the Tin Man they met, who was a representation. He lost his heart, but he was a representation of industry worker. I've really been obsessed with this for a couple of years. So if I follow this, the American people are us Dorothys, the girls next door, is the industry worker who has lost his heart, is our politician, and is our farmer. And look precisely at what's happening today. It's eerily similar. So we all know the story. They're out there, and the Wicked Witch comes along and puts them to sleep. That's where I wonder if that's where we've been. Are we waking up? Did we get put to sleep? Was it an illusion? Did we get comfortable? Did we get complacent? But the meaning of the story is exactly where we are in this moment. We've pulled back that curtain. There isn't a wizard, but here's what we're going to find out again. We've got the courage. We've got the heart. We've got the brain. Here we are, we the people. Now we need to activate that again. And I guarantee you, we're going to find our way back. And I can't even share with you the depth of the energy that I feel in this parallel and where we've been missing and why I'm so hopeful, because I think we are back.
Well, I agree with you, and I think you're doing a really good job of expressing it, actually. And of course, the media, which is supposed to be the awakener, has become over the last few decades the deadening agent. It has become part of the drug given us to keep us asleep, partly because so much of the mainstream media is owned by those same corporate forces. So if it were decades ago and some factory was putting putting carcinogens in the water that went downstream, a reporter would come to their editor and say, we need to do a story about this, and they might get a Pulitzer Prize. Today, the editor might say, kill the story, because the newspaper is owned by the same company that owns the factory. So Americans are waking up to all this. They're waking up to the fact we have this corporate aristocracy whose profit maximization is placed before the health and well-being of the American people. The last thing I want to point out, and I'm sure that this story is very well known to you, but I think one of the reasons this awakening is happening, Erin, is because people are seeing in our own backyards and in our own country things that unfortunately have been happening in other countries for a long time. I'm sure you're aware of Steven Donziger being under house arrest, what Chevron is doing to him to shut him up. What Chevron is doing, what they did to the indigenous tribes living in that part of the Amazon. And it's the same kind of thing, not lining the wells, right, poisoning the water. They got an $8 billion settlement. And so Chevron, with all their billions and billions and billions of dollars, instead of paying up and helping these people and changing their ways, instead are taking off after Steven Donziger. Do you have anything about that case that you want to say?
Well, this is certainly not how it should work out, but everything you're ending with is everything we've been talking about. And that moment of oppression or suppression or, putting off on someone else something that you did to bring them down, to continue to hide the truth. This is where we, the people, will make a difference. And for those that were out there in that fight, to support him, to rally behind him, to hold that up about what the truth is, that becomes so critical. We have been discounted as the people. I think we've discounted ourselves. We've lost connection with our neighbors, but we need to get back back to that, or you're going to see more and more stories like this. It's just not right. For me, this isn't, we're always towing some party line, and part of that could be we're going to tow a corporate line. When are we going to get in line and tow a human line? You know right from wrong. You know what you need to be supporting, and we need to show up. I'm telling you, when we show up, that's when things are going to change. And I'll jump in there and do whatever I can to help, but that is exactly what we're going to need. And those numbers matter. A PG&E did that to us. It was just Roberta, so what? If it's just Erin, who the hell is she anyway? Yeah. So what? Mm-hmm. But when it became 100, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that movement, that collective. And one thing I do want to share before we go. We are water. We really, truly are water. What, 93% of our brain's water, 83% of our lung is water, 68% or 70% or more of our body is water? I want you to remember something. When we disconnect from the environment, we have disconnected from ourselves. When you're feeling lost, I want you to get to water, and I want you to think about this for a moment. The resiliency and the strength and the fortitude of water. Really think about that. It carves hills and valleys. It can change coastal landforms. You are water, and you can be that. You are it, and you can make those changes. And when rivers and creeks and tributaries meet, that water meets, it creates the Niagara Falls. Look at the force. That is what will happen when we as people, and we too are water, converge. The force is immense. If you were lost, find your way back to water, and you will again find yourself. You are that resiliency. You do have that strength. You do have that fortitude. You can carve a hill and a valley, and you can help change this nation's and the face of it, and get us on the trajectory in the right place where we need to go.
That was very beautiful. That was very eloquent. And I think we should remember that hundreds of years ago, there were pagan cultures where particularly women, often called witches, wise women, held aloft the consciousness of divine partnership, much like you just described, a sacred relationship between people and the oceans and the rivers and the streams and the trees and the skies. And when an early dispensation of Christianity at that time brought into the thought system, particularly in the West, that Earth was just something to be used by man for man's utilitarian purposes, that's where the disconnect began. Mm-hmm. That's where it all started. And what you're doing, and what I love about you, Erin, is that you're bringing all of that together. You're not separating environmental activism from this recognition, not only of the psychological and the emotional things that we just talked about, but really the spiritual things that you just pointed to. That something's very, very wrong within us, within our souls, that we would not recognize that something is very wrong to lack reverence towards the earth. There's something insane about destroying your own habitat. Right. There's something very, very off when you don't realize what water does for us, should we not now do for water? Right. And that if we allow the water to be destroyed, we're destroyed. If we allow the earth to be destroyed, we'll be destroyed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's Rachel Carson's saying back from 1963. And all this time, boy, did she see it then. We've got to stop trying to control and alter nature. We've been given that fateful power. But what we need to begin to do is alter and change ourselves. We have to be here for nature. We've destroyed that. And to do it was ultimately a war upon ourselves. I still believe there's a great awakening happening. And I'm going to tell you, I am really excited to be a part of it.
Well, you're the best of leaders. You are the best of leaders. I hope that this is the first of many conversations that we will have. I hope that I will. Absolutely. I want everybody to remember Superman's not coming, but you are. Our national water crisis and what we, the people, can do about it. You've heard it here from Erin Brockovich. You can't get better leadership than Erin Brockovich, but her point, and certainly a point that all of us know in our heart to be true, we all have to find our inner Erin Brockovich. We all have to become the citizens we can be now. And there's no subject where it matters more than on the subject of our water. Erin, thank you. Thank you so much.
I get to. I so enjoyed the conversation. And listen, I'm coming to Washington D.C. and I think we can really shake it up.
You come here. You come here. I can't. I don't know how we do it with COVID, but I was going to say I'll host a luncheon for you. We'll take care of it. You just get
We'll get
here,
there.
and we'll have a lot of fun and change the world together.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for your time. And truly, I'm a great admirer and your courage in running for president. It was a great moment for so many of us. And thank you for everything that you do. You're a huge inspiration for me.
Right back at you. Thank you so much.
Be well. I'll see you soon in DC.
So, I'm sure that you now understand why I'm so excited about Erin Brockovich and her new book. And I hope that you're thinking about ways that you too will check out in your own community. What's the deal with the water quality there? And what could you possibly do to improve it? Now, Ask Marianne. I invite all of you who have questions for me to write into Marianne at castmedia, K-A-S-T media.com. And the letter I'm going to read today is from Eva. Okay, here we go. Dear Marianne, thank you for all that you do and for giving your opinion and shining light and love into the world. Thank you. I am 32 years old, and my mom is in her late 60s. She and I keep getting into arguments around racist comments that she says. She never says anything overtly racist, but it's like she doesn't know what she's saying. For example, I will tell her how I feel so strongly that white women are being called to take a stand against racism and have radical empathy towards Black people. Then she says that Black people are having children faster than white people, and soon Black people will be in power. She doesn't exactly say why she had that response, but it feels to me like she's trying to instill fear in me or is somehow trying to deaden my anti-racism. And that likely had been passed on to her from her parents. And when I point it out to her, she gets offended and we end up getting into a fight about it. She worked as a caregiver in her career and cared for me and my sister and father all of her life. And she says that she feels she does not have the energy to be an activist now. In a way, I understand that, and I don't understand why the racist undertone comments she says, and then we aren't able to see eye to eye or to give understanding to one another. I love my mother more than anyone in the entire world, and she is the one person that has been there for me through everything. I feel that by having important conversations about racism with my family is something that I should do to help bring light and love into the world so that Black people can be treated fairly in this country. However, the last thing I want to do is to get into an argument with my mother that I love so dearly, and it does not end up in a loving interaction for us. I don't know that she and I will see things the same way on this topic, and for some reason that devastates me. Please help me grapple with the shock of the realization that my family maybe isn't as anti-racist as I thought. And also, how do I keep love in my heart when this realization comes up? I only want to have loving interactions with my mom. Yet I also care about anti-racism. I hope this makes sense. I would love to hear your advice. Thank you, Eva. Okay, Eva, we're going to have a conversation about nonviolent communication and nonviolent philosophy in general. So there's a line from Martin Luther King, I think one of his most powerful statements. He said, "You have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt." This reminds me of a line in the Course in Miracles that says, "It is your job to tell your brother he is right even when he is wrong." And it says that doesn't mean you tell him he's not being foolish when in fact he's being foolish. But it means this: a lot of communication power lies beyond the words we say. We all know this. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So take Martin Luther King's comment, "You have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt." If people feel, no matter what our tone of voice, no matter what our words, if they feel subconsciously, and a lot of communication is subconscious, If people feel we're making them wrong for their position, they are less likely to hear what we're trying to say because they will go into protection mode. So the first job of nonviolent communication is to just listen to someone. You're not to affirm your mother's comments that have a racist nuance there, more than a nuance. You're not to affirm that, but you are to affirm your mother. You are to affirm who she deeply is. Because by your affirming who she deeply is, she is more likely to become who she deeply is. If your mother says something like that and your comment is, wow, that's a racist comment. Oh, we're off to the races, and she's closed down. But if she feels, I hear you. I also think, Mom, I mean, if you think about it, it's a racist comment right there. But you can say it if that comes from a place in you where first you had gotten to affirm her. That's the first job in nonviolent communication, that you mirror someone's innocence. You mirror their innocence first. And sometimes it's all on a subconscious level. It's all on an invisible plane. You know, what happens in the material world is just the tip of the iceberg. So much is going on beyond what the eye can see, beyond what the ear can hear, but where we can all feel it. There are times in life, and I think it's really important because we're living at one of those times where you hear a racist comment, you hear an anti-Semitic comment, you hear a homophobic comment, you hear a misogynist comment, you don't keep your mouth shut. It's really important that you say something. There are times in life where definitely the issue is something needs to be said here. But there are other times where the issue is, how am I going to play this? And if you don't play it with showing respect for someone's deep humanity first, then no matter what you say, they're not going to hear you. They're not going to be open to what you say anyway. So that's the philosophy of nonviolence. That's why Martin Luther King and Gandhi, all about when you say love will heal the world. Love is not namby-pamby. Love is not weak. Love doesn't mean you don't speak up. But it does have to do with how we speak up. And first and foremost, it has to do with how we listen to one another. So I think it's very touching that you love your mom. I think it's very touching that you want to have a good relationship with your mom. But it's just an area where perhaps she could grow. And making her wrong is not going to make her grow. Listening to her, affirming her humanity. That doesn't mean you're affirming her position. You're affirming her deep humanity. And when the time is right, you'll know the words to say. You simply ask the God of your understanding, how can I have a miracle with my mother on this topic? Amazing things are going to happen. Thank you, Eva. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for being with me on the Marianne Williamson podcast today. I want to thank Lauren Selsky and Amanda Elliott and Wendy Zoller and Sam J. and everyone at Cast Media for joining with me, being on the team so that we can bring this to you. If you're enjoying the podcast, please rate it, review on iTunes, and check us out on YouTube. I hope that today's conversation with Erin Brockovich will motivate you, inspire you to check out the water quality in your own community, and more than anything else, do something about it. Kick ass. Thank you so much. God bless. Till next time.